He thought bleeding for his son was love enough. But what if the boy never asked to be saved? For years, an aging father slipped quietly into a rundown clinic, exchanging pints of his own blood for just enough money to help his son stay in college. He never told a soul, not even the boy. But when graduation day finally came, the father showed up, proud-tired, and utterly unprepared for what he would discover. If you find value in real stories told with clarity and truth, make sure to subscribe to stay informed with Real Father Stories. It was the first time James Miller had worn a tie in nearly a decade. The knot sat crooked beneath his wrinkled collar, the maroon fabric slightly frayed, a forgotten relic tucked in the back of a closet filled mostly with mechanic jumpsuits and flannel shirts. He stood just beyond the university gates, eyes squinting beneath a battered baseball cap as students poured out in waves, laughing, hugging, snapping selfies with shiny diplomas in hand. James scanned every face. So many proud parents, so many sons in crisp suits, but none looked for him. The bouquet he clutched was humble gas station carnations wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, and his palms were still stained with grease he couldn't fully wash off. Today isn't about me, he told himself. It never was. His son Ethan was graduating from law school, first lawyer in the Miller family. No one from their sleepy town in Arkansas had made it that far. But Ethan was brilliant, driven, destined. At least that's what James believed. What Ethan didn't know, what no one knew, was how his father had paid for that destiny. Not through a savings plan, not with help from relatives, but through selling his own blood. Every month for 5 straight years, James rode a 6 a.m. Greyhound into Little Rock, signed his name on a clipboard at a plasma center, and lay silently while his body was tapped for money. They paid $80 per visit. He made it stretch. Sometimes it meant skipping meals. Sometimes it meant duct taping his work boots instead of buying new ones. Dedication. Like that's rare, one nurse had once told him. James didn't reply. He wasn't looking for praise. He just needed Ethan to stay enrolled. Now standing on the edge of a world he'd never entered, one of suits and scholarships, James felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Fear. What if Ethan didn't want him here? What if the boy was ashamed of the father who looked like he'd wandered in from a truck stop? He didn't have a smartphone. Didn't know how to check the program schedule. He just stood there, waiting. And then through the crowd he saw him. Ethan. Same posture, same cautious walk. But he wasn't alone. Another young man was beside him, taller, wearing a tailored suit and polished loafers, their hands brushed, then clasped. Ethan laughed at something, then leaned into the man's shoulder. The stranger kissed him, soft, intimate, just behind the ear. James blinked, not from shock, from the kind of ache that only silence can grow. Not because his son was gay, but because he had no idea. 5 years, 60 blood donations, 1 broken down body, and he had never once asked his son what kind of life he truly wanted. Ethan hadn't seen his father in over a year. He told himself it was because of law school, the pressure, the internships, the endless reading. But deep down, he knew better. He was avoiding him, not because he didn't love his dad, but because he didn't know how to face him anymore. James Miller had raised him alone after Ethan's mother passed when he was 8. A man of few words and rough hands, James never missed. A parent-teacher night, never forgot. A birthday, never left Ethan hungry, even when it meant eating instant noodles for dinner himself. But love in James's world came wrapped in silence. No, I'm proud of you. No, I love you, son. just a steady engine hum on the drive to school and a hand on the shoulder when grades came in. When Ethan got the full scholarship to Morgan Law, he knew his dad was proud. But he also knew his father would never understand the rest of who he was, the part he'd spent years keeping hidden. Ethan was gay, and he had never told him. It wasn't shame. It was fear. Fear that the one man who gave everything might see him differently, might feel disappointed, might pull back. And so, Ethan waited. Year after year. Hiding, dating in secret, lying through holidays. The man beside him today, Liam, wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the man Ethan planned to build a life with. The one who held him when he woke up in a panic over grades. The one who knew about James and understood why Ethan still couldn't make that call. But Liam was getting tired of hiding. "You're not in high school anymore," he'd said just 2 weeks ago. "You can argue with Supreme Court judges, but not your own father." Ethan had laughed it off, but the words stung. So today, he had decided if his father showed up and he doubted he wouldn't lie anymore. No more pretending. No more, "He's just a friend." But now, standing in the crowd hand in hand with Liam, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Because there, near the outer fence, in a faded cap and crooked tie, stood a man he hadn't seen in far too long. His father. And James was looking at him, looking at them, not angrily, not confused, just quiet, a silence Ethan knew all too well. And somehow, that hurt more than yelling ever could. The crowd kept moving. Caps flew. Laughter echoed. But for a moment, time stopped between them. Ethan didn't move. Neither did James. They stood maybe 20 feet apart, a father and a son, separated not by space, but by the invisible wall of everything never said. Liam noticed first. "Is that your dad?" he whispered. Ethan nodded slowly. "You gonna say something?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know what to say." James clutched the bouquet tighter. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Tired in a way that said, "I've waited years for this moment, and I don't even know if I belong here." Then suddenly it wasn't Ethan who moved. It was Liam. He stepped forward, broke the frozen stillness, and walked straight up to James with his hand out. "Hi, sir. I'm Liam. Ethan's—" He paused, then finished without flinching. "Partner." James blinked. His gaze dropped to the handshake. Then to Ethan, then back to Liam. Seconds passed. Then James reached out and took his hand. Firm, steady, no flinch. "I figured," he said simply. His voice was low, rough like gravel, but calm. Then he turned his eyes to Ethan, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan couldn't read them. "Didn't think I'd show up?" "Huh," James said. Ethan shook his head. "I wasn't sure you'd want to." James looked away for a second like he was counting to 10 in his head. "Then I missed your high school graduation because I was changing tires on a snowed-in highway. Took the job because we needed the rent. Swore I wouldn't miss the next one." Ethan's throat tightened. "I didn't know if you'd even care," he said quietly. "I sold blood for 5 years, so you could be here," James replied. "You think I didn't care." Silence again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was loaded. Ethan felt his knees go weak. Liam put a hand on his back. "You, what?" "I didn't tell you," James said, voice cracking just slightly. "Didn't want you feeling like you owed me. That's not what this was." Ethan stepped closer, eyes glassy now. "And I didn't tell you about Liam," he whispered. "I thought you'd be ashamed." James shook his head. "I'm not ashamed of you, son. I'm ashamed I made you think I might be." They didn't say much after that. James walked beside Ethan and Liam down the sloped courtyard, dodging confetti and hugs and iPhones pointed everywhere. Every now and then, someone would call Ethan's name, a classmate, a professor, a mentor, and congratulate him with a handshake or a side hug. Ethan smiled politely, but his mind was spinning. His father was here. His father had met Liam. And his father had just admitted to bleeding literally so Ethan could live the life he wanted. And Ethan hadn't known a damn thing. "How long have you two?" James asked quietly as they stepped into a shaded area under the administration building. 3 years, Ethan replied. James nodded slowly. "That's longer than your mom and I dated before she got pregnant." Ethan laughed nervous. But James smiled. Genuinely. "I'm happy for you," he said. "You look happy." Liam gave Ethan a gentle squeeze on the back. "Thank you," Ethan said, barely above a whisper. Then James reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin, wrinkled envelope. He handed it to Ethan. "What's this?" "Something I wrote last year," James said. "Didn't know if I'd ever have the guts to give it to you." Ethan opened it. Inside was a check handwritten, post-dated, and a letter. "Son, this isn't much. Just what I've managed to save from the odd jobs since you left. I know you're building your future, and I want to help. Not because I expect anything back, but because that's what fathers do. They give even if it costs them quietly. I've missed you, but I never stopped rooting for you. I don't know who you are now, but I trust you're someone good. Love, Dad." Ethan had to step away to stop himself from crying. He leaned against a pillar, holding the envelope like it was fragile glass. And that's when it happened. James stumbled slightly, hand clutching his side. "You okay?" Liam asked, rushing forward. James nodded, but the wince didn't lie. "Just stood too long in the sun, I think." But Ethan had seen that look before. Back when his dad used to pass out at the dinner table after work. Back when he brushed off pain with a sip of tap water and a grunt. "Dad," Ethan said firmly, "when's the last time you saw a doctor?" James didn't answer, because the truth was something neither of them was ready to hear. "Dad, seriously, when was your last checkup?" James waved a hand. "I'm fine, son. Just a little tired. Don't make a scene." But Ethan wasn't letting it go. Not now. Not after everything. "Liam, get the car. We're going to urgent care," he said. "I said I'm fine," James repeated more firmly this time. Ethan turned to face him. "You donated blood every month for 5 years. You worked 2 jobs. You live alone. Don't tell me you're fine when I just saw your knees buckle." Silence. James looked away. For a moment, the father shrank not physically but emotionally, like a wall that had been holding for decades, had cracked and the water was finally seeping through. "I didn't want you to worry," he said. "That's not your job anymore," Ethan replied. "Let me worry, please." The urgent care visit turned into an overnight stay. Low blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, early signs of anemia. Nothing life-threatening, but everything pointing to a man who had pushed himself far too long without stopping. "You ever tell your son what you've been doing?" the nurse asked, while James lay hooked up to monitors. James shook his head. "He just found out today." The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, paused at the foot of the bed. "My dad did the same," she said. "Sold plasma to help me through nursing school. Didn't tell me until the day he collapsed at graduation. I resented him for years because I never got to say thank you." James looked up. "You still have time," she added before leaving the room. That night, Ethan sat by the hospital bed while his father slept. The monitors beeped steadily like a second heartbeat in the room. Liam had gone home to grab clothes. Ethan was alone now. Just him and James, and the decades of silence between them. He picked up his dad's hand, rough calloused knuckles scarred from decades of labor, and held it gently. "I didn't tell you about Liam because I thought you'd stop loving me," he whispered. "But you didn't even stop giving, even when I gave you nothing back." James stirred. And in that drowsy haze, without opening his eyes, he murmured, "I never needed you to give back. I just needed you to live well." James was discharged 2 days later with a stern warning from the doctor. Rest. Eat. Stop thinking you're still 35. Ethan drove him home in silence, glancing occasionally at the man in the passenger seat, this weathered, quietly stubborn man who had become a stranger, then a hero, then something even more fragile. When they pulled into James's driveway, a crooked little house on a dead-end street with patchy grass and a mailbox held up by duct tape, Ethan swallowed hard. He hadn't been here in over 3 years. Nothing had changed. Not the dent in the garage door, not the old porch swing with one chain slightly lower than the other, but something had changed. Inside the living room, as James settled into his old recliner, Ethan noticed a drawer left slightly open. He reached for it, absent-minded, curious. Inside were dozens of receipts from the plasma center, neatly folded, dated, logged. Alongside them, handwritten lists of Ethan's tuition payments, copies of his school schedules, printouts of dorm addresses, and tucked at the bottom a small stack of birthday cards, all unsent. Ethan sat on the carpet, silent, eyes scanning each card, one for each year of law school, each with a message like, "Proud of you, son. I hope you're eating well. Don't forget your mom would have been so proud. Sorry I couldn't call. No phone yet. Maybe next year." He felt like someone had pressed a fist into his lungs. And under the stack, one last envelope, thicker than the rest. Inside it, a letter never mailed. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I guess I never had the courage to say it out loud. Maybe I didn't know how. Maybe I was just scared that if I showed up, you'd shut the door. I know you've got someone in your life. I saw the photo in your newsletter. You looked happy. That's all I ever wanted. If I sold blood, or worked long hours, or skipped meals, it wasn't to make you owe me. It was because giving is all I ever learned to do. I wish I knew how to talk better. How to ask about your heart instead of just your grades. But I'm trying, and if you'll let me, I'll keep trying. Love, Dad." James hadn't seen Ethan pull the letter, hadn't seen him reading it through tear-blurred eyes. When Ethan finally looked up, his father was watching. Quiet again. But this time, the silence meant something different. This time it meant I'm here. 3 weeks later, James Miller stood in the middle of his son's apartment in Chicago suitcase. In one hand, a confused expression in the other. "This place got heat?" he asked, eyeing the floor-to-ceiling windows like they might leak wind. Ethan laughed. "Yes, Dad. And plumbing, and Wi-Fi." James nodded slowly. "Didn't have any of that in '82. Not that fancy." He didn't say it out loud, but he felt it in every corner of the spotless kitchen, the minimalist furniture, the photographs of Ethan and Liam, happy, candid, unhidden. He didn't feel like he belonged. Not yet. But Ethan was trying. "You don't have to unpack tonight," Ethan said. "Just rest." James sat at the edge of the guest bed, soft, too soft, and stared at the framed photo on the nightstand. Ethan in cap and gown, smiling under the summer sun. Liam's hand rested gently on his back. They looked free, and James wasn't sure how to fit into that freedom. The next few days were awkward. James offered to cook undercooked the chicken, tried to do laundry, flooded the hallway, offered to walk to the store, got lost 2 blocks down, and refused to use GPS. But they talked, more than ever. Ethan started asking about his father's youth, not just what he did, but how he felt. "What did you dream about when you were my age?" he asked one night while washing dishes together. James was quiet. "Your mother," he finally said, "and a job that didn't break my back." Ethan nodded. "Did you ever want anything for yourself?" James looked out the window. Not until I saw you holding that diploma. They stood there in the quiet hum of the kitchen, and something shifted. Not forgiveness that had already begun, not healing that was ongoing, but something new space. For both of them to be real. Vulnerable, messy, James was learning how to rest. Ethan was learning how to let his father in, not as a martyr, but as a man. And Liam watched it all with quiet grace, never pushing, never judging, just holding the door open. "You two are more alike than you think," he said one night. Ethan smiled. "That's the scary part." James overheard it, and for the first time in years, he laughed. It was nearly 2 a.m. when Ethan heard the soft rustling. He stepped out of his room and found his father asleep on the living room couch, a blanket half draped over his chest, the TV still flickering with a rerun of Jeopardy. James had insisted the guest bed was too soft, said the couch reminded him of the truck seats he used to nap on during double shifts. Ethan was about to turn off the TV when he heard it, a whisper, slurred, sleep-heavy, but clear. "I wish I'd known how to hold him when he was little." Ethan froze. His father shifted, murmuring again, maybe in a dream, maybe in confession. Always thought feeding him, fixing things, was enough. But he needed more. I didn't know how. Ethan felt something break. Not like glass, more like a wall inside him softening at the edges. He sat down beside the couch, and for the first time in his adult life, he reached out and held his father's hand. Not as a son trying to prove himself, not as a man trying to reclaim lost years, just as someone finally seeing his father as a whole, imperfect human being. The next morning, James didn't mention it. Neither did Ethan. But something had shifted in the silence between them. Something sacred. Weeks passed. James started helping Liam in the garden, started taking short walks, started sharing stories Ethan had never heard before about the one time he tried to run away at 12, or the day he nearly proposed to someone else before meeting Ethan's mom. Ethan listened, smiled, laughed. And one day, just before he left for work, he turned back at the door and said, "I love you, Dad." James didn't respond right away. But when Ethan closed the door behind him, he whispered to the empty room, "I always did." The framed diploma still hangs in Ethan's office, but right beside it now is a photo of a father in a crooked tie holding gas station carnations, eyes squinting in the sun. The caption beneath reads, "He gave more than blood. He gave me a name I could be proud of." Forgiveness doesn't fix the past, but it frees the future.